In the heart of medieval England, a darkness was spreading through the green gold lands of Nottinghamshire. It wasn't the shadow of war or the spectre of plague, but a creeping rot of greed that poisoned the very air the people breathed. This greed had a name: the Sheriff of Nottingham. A man whose heart was as cold and hard as the coins he coveted. He served a distant, preoccupied king by squeezing the life out of the common folk. Every sunrise brought a new tax, a new levy, a new burden that bent the backs of farmers and artisans until they threatened to snap. The laughter that once echoed through the villages had faded into whispers of despair. But even in the deepest shadows, a single spark of defiance can ignite a flame. In this case, the spark was a young nobleman named Robin of Locksley. Robin was no stranger to privilege. He lived a life of comfort, his days filled with the thrill of the hunt, the camaraderie of feasts, and the satisfying thud of an arrow hitting its mark. His skill with the longbow was already the stuff of local legend, a talent honed through years of dedicated practice. He could split a willow wand at 100 paces, his eye as keen as a hawk's, his hand as steady as an ancient oak. Life, for Robin, was good. It was simple. But that was about to change. One market day, Robin rode into Nottingham town, his mood as bright as the morning sun. He was there to purchase a new string for his beloved bow. The square, usually a vibrant tapestry of commerce and chatter, was unnervingly quiet. A crowd had gathered, their faces a mixture of fear and anger. At the center of it all stood one of the sheriff's tax collectors, a man with a sneer permanently etched onto his face, flanked by two hulking guards. Before them knelt a miller, his face streaked with flour and tears. The miller's crime: he couldn't pay the latest crown levy on his grain, a tax so exorbitant it was designed to be impossible to meet. The tax collector kicked away the miller's meager bag of coins. "This is not enough," he spat. "The sheriff demands his due. Your mill, your home, it's all forfeit." The miller's wife let out a wail of anguish, clutching her small children. The crowd murmured, their anger low, rumbling thunder, but they were powerless. Fear was a leash, and the sheriff held it tight. Robin watched, and something inside him shifted. This wasn't justice. This was theft, plain and simple. Dressed up in the robes of law, the comfort of his noble life suddenly felt like a heavy, suffocating blanket. He saw not just a miller being robbed, but the soul of his country being bled dry. The laughter he remembered from his childhood, the honest sweat of the working man, the simple dignity of a life well lived, all of it was being trampled under the sheriff's iron-heeled boot. Impulse, hot and righteous, took over. Before he could think, Robin dismounted. He strode through the silent crowd, his green tunic a stark contrast to the drab browns of the peasants. He placed a hand on the tax collector's shoulder. "That's enough," he said, his voice low but carrying an authority that made the man flinch. The collector, recovering his bluster, sneered, "And who are you to interfere with the king's business, pretty boy?" Robin didn't answer with words. His hand moved in a blur, snatching the heavy purse of collected taxes from the man's belt. With his other hand, he grabbed a dusty sack of flour from the miller's cart. In one fluid motion, he appended the purse into the sack, the coins disappearing into the white powder. He then tossed the heavy sack back to the stunned tax collector. "There," Robin said, a dangerous glint in his eye. "Now the sheriff can have his flour, and the miller can keep his home." A shocked silence fell over the square, broken a moment later by a sputtering of laughter from the crowd. The tax collector's face turned a shade of crimson that clashed horribly with his flour-dusted clothes. Humiliated and enraged, he shrieked at his guards, "Seize him! Seize the traitor!" But Robin was already moving. He vaulted back onto his horse, the animal rearing as Robin spurred it on. He gave the crowd one last look, a look that held a promise, and then he was gone, a green flash disappearing toward the welcoming darkness of Sherwood Forest. The news of his defiance spread like wildfire. To the poor and oppressed, it was a moment of pure, unadulterated joy. A nobleman had stood up for them. But to the Sheriff of Nottingham, it was an act of open rebellion. Sitting in his cold stone castle, his face contorted with fury, the sheriff slammed his fist on the table. He would not be mocked. He would make an example of this arrogant lord. That very evening, a decree was nailed to the gates of Nottingham Castle and to every church door in the shire. Declared Robin of Locksley a traitor to the crown. His lands were seized, his title stripped, and a bounty was placed on his head, dead or alive. He was no longer a lord. He was an outlaw. As the sun set, casting long shadows that looked like grasping fingers, Robin stood at the edge of Sherwood Forest. He had lost everything: his home, his name, his future. But as he looked into the deep, mysterious woods, he didn't feel fear. He felt a sense of purpose he had never known before. He was an outlaw now, a hunted man. But in that moment, he made a vow. If the law served only the rich and powerful, then he would stand outside the law. If the sheriff was the wolf preying on the flock, then he, Robin, would become the shepherd. From this day forward, he would not be Robin of Locksley, the nobleman. He would be something else. He would be a shadow in the trees, an arrow in the dark. He would be Robin Hood. The legend had just begun. Thank you so much for staying with us. If you're excited to see what happens next in the forests of Sherwood, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next story. We'll see you then.
History isn't just what happened, it's what was hidden. Welcome to the Chrono Archives, where lost empires rise again, forgotten legends speak, and ancient truths are brought back to life. From world-shaping history and powerful myths to legendary rulers and timeless civilizations, every story here is carefully uncovered, deeply researched, and cinematically told. The past is calling. Will you answer? Subscribe and journey through time, one unforgettable chronicle at a time.
Hunted, with the sheriff's men hot on his heels, Robin of Locksley plunged into the dark embrace of Sherwood Forest. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves sounded like the footsteps of his pursuers. He ran until his lungs burned and his legs ached, until the sounds of the chase faded into the chirping of crickets and the whisper of the wind through the ancient oaks. This wasn't just an escape, it was a rebirth. The forest, once a place of fear and folklore, was now his only sanctuary. He spent his first days alone, learning the secret paths, the best places to find water, and how to track game with nothing but his wits and his yew bow. The forest was alive, a world unto itself, far from the cruel laws of Prince John and his greedy sheriff. But Robin soon discovered he wasn't the only one who had sought refuge in Sherwood's green depths. One evening, by a crackling fire, he encountered a man dressed head to toe in fine scarlet silk, yet with the calloused hands of a fighter. This was Will Scarlet, a fellow outlaw with a fiery spirit and a hatred for the injustices that had driven him from his home. They talked through the night, sharing stories of their past lives and their shared desire for a fairer world. Will, with his quick temper and even quicker sword, became Robin's first true ally in the woods. Not long after, Robin's path crossed with a man of a very different sort. Near a shallow stream, a large, jovial friar with a love for good food and strong ale challenged him to a friendly contest of strength. This was Friar Tuck. Though a man of the cloth, his loyalty was to the common folk, not the corrupt church officials who grew fat while the poor starved. After a comical tussle that ended with both of them soaking wet and laughing, Tuck joined their cause, his wisdom and good cheer a welcome addition to their small band. As they gathered more followers, men like Much, the miller's son, and Alanadale, the heartbroken minstrel, Robin saw a pattern. Each person had been wronged by the powerful. They were blacksmiths, farmers, and tradesmen, all driven into the forest by crushing taxes and the cruelty of the nobility. They were not criminals by nature, but by necessity. One night, gathered around a large fire, the group shared a meager meal of poached venison. Listening to their stories of hardship, an idea began to form in Robin's mind, an idea as bold and dangerous as it was righteous. He stood up, the firelight dancing across his determined face. "They have taken our lands, our homes, and our freedom," he declared, his voice ringing with conviction. "They feast in their castles while our families starve. The law has failed us, the nobles have failed us. So, we will make our own law." He looked at each face around the fire, Will Scarlet, Friar Tuck, and the others who now looked to him as a leader. "We live in a forest that the rich fear to enter. Their caravans, laden with gold and silks, must pass through our domain. What if we were to lighten their load? We will take from the wealthy who have too much and give to the poor who have nothing. We will become the people's justice." A murmur of excitement spread through the camp. It was a radical idea, a declaration of war against the most powerful men in England. But in Robin's words, they found something they had long since lost: hope. They would no longer hide in the shadows, cowering. They would fight back, and so the merry men were born. With Robin Hood as their leader, this band of outlaws would become a legend. They would turn Sherwood Forest from a simple refuge into a symbol of defiance, a beacon of hope for the oppressed all across England. Their adventures were just beginning, and their names would soon be whispered in taverns and sung in ballads, striking fear into the hearts of the rich and inspiring courage in the hearts of the poor. The legend of Robin Hood and his merry men had truly begun. If you're excited to see what happens next, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single adventure. Join us next as the merry men carry out their very first raid. We'll see you then. As whispers of a mysterious outlaw began to spread through the villages and forests of Nottingham, Robin Hood knew he couldn't stand alone. The fight for justice required more than just one man. It needed a brotherhood. A band of merry men. One sunny afternoon, Robin found himself at a narrow log bridge spanning a babbling brook. It was a strategic crossing, and as he stepped onto it, he saw a giant of a man approaching from the other side. Standing well over 6 feet tall, with arms as thick as tree trunks, the man refused to give way. "I'll cross first," the stranger boomed, brandishing a stout quarterstaff. Robin, never one to back down from a challenge, grinned and replied, "We shall see about that." What followed was a duel for the ages. Staff met staff with a resounding crack, the two men perfectly matched in skill and determination. Robin was quick and agile, dancing on the log, while the giant was a fortress of strength, his blows powerful enough to splinter the wood. For minutes they fought, a whirlwind of motion above the water. Finally, with a mighty swing, the giant caught Robin off balance, sending him tumbling into the cool stream below. Soaked but laughing, Robin emerged from the water. He wasn't angry, he was impressed. "You are a worthy opponent," he shouted. "I have never met a man who could best me with a staff." The giant helped him to the bank, and Robin introduced himself. The giant's name was John Little, a name that brought a chuckle from Robin given the man's immense size. In a moment of playful irony, Robin's men, who had been watching from the trees, declared he should henceforth be known as Little John, and just like that, Robin Hood had found his most loyal and powerful friend. With Little John by his side, the ranks of the merry men began to swell. Will Scarlet, Robin's fiery-tempered cousin, joined their cause, his twin swords ablur in combat. The gentle but devout Friar Tuck, a man who loved a good meal as much as a good deed, brought his wisdom and surprising strength to the group. Alanadale, the heartbroken minstrel, found a new family and a new purpose, his songs becoming the anthems of their rebellion. Each man brought a unique skill, but all shared a common desire: to fight back against the greed and cruelty of the Sheriff of Nottingham. Deep within the ancient, tangled heart of Sherwood Forest, Robin established their secret camp. Here, beneath the shelter of the mighty oaks, he began to train his men. They weren't soldiers fighting in open fields, they were ghosts of the forest. He taught them the art of guerrilla warfare. They learned to move silently through the undergrowth, their green tunics blending with the leaves. They mastered the longbow, practicing until they could hit a leaf from 100 paces. They learned to read the forest like a book. Every rustle of leaves, every snapped twig, every bird call was a signal, a message. Sherwood became their fortress, their ally, and their home. They set clever traps, built hidden shelters, and learned to live off the land, becoming one with their wooded sanctuary. The time for training was over, the time for action had come. Word reached the merry men that a heavily guarded caravan, laden with exorbitant taxes cruelly squeezed from the local villagers, would be passing through Sherwood Forest. This was their chance to strike a real blow against the sheriff. Robin devised a brilliant plan. He positioned his archers high in the trees along a narrow pass, their arrows ready. Little John and a few others were tasked with creating a diversion of fallen tree to block the road ahead. As the tax collector's caravan, arrogant and confident in their armed escort, rumbled into the trap, the tree fell with a thunderous crash. The guards halted in confusion. That was the signal. From the canopy above, a voice rang out, clear and commanding. A gift for the poor, from the sheriff's purse. It was Robin. Before the guards could even look up, a silent storm of arrows rained down. The arrows didn't aim to kill, but to disable. They pinned sleeves to trees, split bowstrings, and sent soldiers scattering in panic. Out of the woods charged the rest of the merry men, led by Little John, their staves and swords flashing. The fight was swift and decisive. The guards, utterly surprised and overwhelmed, quickly surrendered or fled into the forest, where they were hopelessly lost. Robin confronted the trembling tax collector, who cowered beside the overflowing chests of gold. This wealth was stolen from the good people of Nottingham, Robin declared, his voice calm but firm. It is only right that it be returned to them. The merry men cheered as they loaded the treasure onto their own carts. But Robin didn't keep a single coin for himself or his men. He knew their mission was not for personal gain. News of the ambush spread like wildfire. In the taverns and marketplaces of Nottingham, people spoke in hushed, excited tones. They told tales of a phantom archer in green, a giant with a quarterstaff, and a band of outlaws who stole from the rich and gave to the poor. Alan Adale's ballads carried the story far and wide, turning an act of defiance into a legend. For the first time in a long time, the oppressed people of Nottingham felt a flicker of hope. They had a champion, someone who dared to fight for them. Robin Hood's name became a symbol of resistance, a prayer on the lips of the downtrodden. Back in his cold, stone castle, the Sheriff of Nottingham seethed with fury. He had been humiliated, his authority challenged, and his coffers emptied. The stories of Robin Hood were an insult to his power. Staring at a map of Sherwood Forest, his knuckles white as he gripped the table, he made a solemn vow. He would not rest until this Robin Hood was captured. He would hunt him down, dismantle his band of rogues, and make an example of him for all to see. The forest would run red before he would allow this rebellion to continue. A storm was gathering over Nottingham, and the battle between the outlaw hero and the tyrannical sheriff had only just begun. Thank you for watching this chapter of the legend unfold. If you're enjoying the story of Robin Hood and his merry men, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next part of their epic adventure. We'll see you in Sherwood Forest. The Sheriff of Nottingham was not a man to take defeat lightly. After being outsmarted and humiliated time and time again, he was boiling with a rage so hot it could forge steel. He declared, "No more games. Robin Hood will hang from the gallows, and his so-called merry men will join him." And so began the sheriff's great retaliation, a storm of iron and fury aimed directly at the heart of Sherwood Forest. His first move was insidious. He didn't just send soldiers crashing through the woods that had failed before. Instead, he wove a web of traps, not for Robin, but for the very people Robin swore to protect. He tripled the taxes on every bushel of wheat, every cask of ale, every scrap of cloth. The villagers, already struggling, were pushed to the brink of starvation. He stationed guards at every market, on every road, their eyes cold and watchful, ready to seize anyone suspected of even whispering Robin Hood's name. The pressure was immense. The flow of food and supplies into Sherwood, once a steady stream from grateful villagers, slowed to a trickle. The merry men, used to feasting and laughter, now rationed their bread and looked at each other with hungry, worried eyes. Little John, his usual booming laughter replaced by a grim silence, would slam his fist on the table. How are we to fight on empty stomachs? The people need us, but we can barely feed ourselves. The whispers started small, like rustling leaves in the wind, but they grew into a storm of doubt within the camp. "Is this still working?" a man would mutter to his friend. "We fight, we steal from the rich, but the people are suffering more than ever. The sheriff's grip is tighter because of us." All eyes turned to Robin. His confident smile seemed strained, his usual easygoing nature replaced by a heavy tension. He would pace by the fire late at night, long after the others were asleep, poring over maps of Nottingham, his brow furrowed in thought. He tried to keep morale high. "Courage, my friends," he'd proclaim. "This is the darkness before the dawn. The sheriff is desperate, and a desperate man makes mistakes. We just need to be patient and wait for our moment." But his words, which once inspired unwavering loyalty, now met with hesitant nods and downcast eyes. The joy of their rebellion was fading, replaced by the grim reality of a war of attrition they seemed to be losing. The tension wasn't just in Sherwood. In the villages, the mood was sour. A mother, whose child cried from hunger, spat on the ground as a merchant passed. "Robin Hood promised to help us," she hissed to her neighbor, "but where is he now? All his grand gestures have brought is more soldiers and more taxes. We are worse off than before." This sentiment spread like a disease, poisoning the goodwill the merry men had worked so hard to cultivate. Fear and desperation were turning the people against their own champion. Robin knew he had to do something bold, something to turn the tide and restore faith in their cause. He gathered his closest advisors, Little John, Will Scarlet, and Friar Tuck. The air in their secret meeting place was thick with unspoken fears. "The sheriff is strangling us," Robin said, his voice low and urgent. "He's using the people as a weapon against us. We can't win a defensive war. We must strike, and strike hard, at the heart of his power, Nottingham Castle itself." Will Scarlet, ever the pragmatist, shook his head. "It's a fortress, Robin. We've scouted it 100 times. The walls are too high, the guards too many. It would be a suicide mission, not if we have an inside man," Robin countered, a flicker of the old fire returning to his eyes. "The sheriff is hosting a grand archery tournament in 2 days' time. The prize is a golden arrow, but the real prize for us is access. I will enter the tournament in disguise. While all eyes are on the competition, a small team will use the distraction to infiltrate the castle's treasury. We'll empty his coffers and show the people that the sheriff is not invincible." It was a risky, almost insane plan. Little John argued against it fiercely. "He'll be looking for you, Robin. It's a trap." But desperation was a powerful motivator. The merry men were tired of hiding, tired of being hungry, and tired of feeling helpless. The idea of a daring strike, a return to the bold tactics that had made them legends, was too tempting to resist. After a long and heated debate, they agreed. Robin would go to Nottingham. The plan was set into motion. Robin, disguised as a grizzled, one-eyed archer from a distant county, would enter the tournament. Meanwhile, Little John and Will Scarlet would lead a small, elite team to a prearranged weak point in the castle's outer wall, a small postern gate used for deliveries. Their contact inside was a young stable boy named Thomas, whose family had been ruined by the sheriff's taxes. He had sworn to help them, promising to leave the gate unlocked at the precise moment the final round of the tournament began. The day of the tournament arrived, tense and overcast. The courtyard of Nottingham Castle was a riot of color and noise, packed with knights, ladies, and common folk, all eager for the spectacle. The sheriff sat on a raised platform, a smug grin on his face, the glistening golden arrow displayed beside him. He scanned the crowd, his eyes lingering on every archer who stepped up to the line. Robin kept his head down, his heart pounding a steady rhythm against his ribs. He shot with skill, but not with his usual flair, careful to remain just good enough to advance without drawing too much attention. He made it to the final round, just as planned. He was up against the sheriff's own captain of the guard, a man renowned for his deadly accuracy. As the trumpet sounded for the final shots, Robin knew it was the signal. Across the castle grounds, Little John, Will Scarlet, and a handful of others crept towards the postern gate. They found it, just as Thomas had described. Little John put a hand on the iron handle and pushed. It didn't budge, it was locked and barred. A cold dread washed over them. They heard a noise from the shadows of the alleyway. The young stable boy, Thomas, stepped forward, his face pale and tear-streaked. Behind him, emerging from every doorway and from the rooftops above, were the sheriff's guards, their crossbows all aimed directly at the merry men. "I'm sorry," Thomas sobbed. "They have my family." Back in the tournament courtyard, as Robin drew his final arrow, the sheriff stood up, that smug grin widening into a triumphant leer. "Seize him," he roared, pointing not at the archer's line, but towards the far side of the castle. "Spring the trap." A horn blew, a signal of capture. Robin's blood ran cold. He knew instantly what had happened. His plan had not just failed, it had been a trap from the very beginning. He had walked his best men into the sheriff's clutches. Little John, Will Scarlet, his brothers in arms, were captured, and it was all his fault. The crowd gasped as the disguised Robin stood frozen, the arrow still on his bowstring, his face a mask of horror and disbelief. The sheriff's laughter echoed across the castle grounds, a sound of absolute victory. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today, we're diving deep into Chapter 5 of our Robin Hood saga, and let me tell you, things are about to get really interesting. Why? Because we're finally introducing the one and only Maid Marian. Now, Marian isn't just some damsel in distress. She's a pivotal character who completely changes the game for Robin and his merry men. Let's set the scene. Up until now, Robin's been a force of nature in Sherwood Forest, but he's been operating on the outside, a ghost haunting the sheriff's supply lines. Maid Marian, on the other hand, is on the inside. She's a noble woman, respected and seemingly loyal, moving freely within the opulent, treacherous walls of Nottingham Castle. She walks the same halls as the sheriff, she dines with his cronies, and she hears the whispers that never leave the castle. But here's the twist. Marian has a heart of gold and a will of steel. She sees the suffering of the common folk, the crushing taxes, and the brutal injustice enforced by the sheriff. And she can't stand by and do nothing, so she begins her own secret crusade. By day, she's Lady Marian, a picture of grace and nobility. By night, or in secret, she's a benefactor to the poor, using her wealth and influence to smuggle food, medicine, and money to those who need it most. This chapter is where her path and Robin's gloriously collide. Maybe they were childhood sweethearts, torn apart by circumstance, and this is their long-awaited reunion. Picture the scene. Robin, disguised, is on a mission in Nottingham Town, and he sees this noble lady, Marian, discreetly leaving a sack of grain on the doorstep of a starving family. Their eyes meet across the cobblestone street, and in that instant, years of separation melt away. The recognition is immediate, a spark that has never truly been extinguished. Or perhaps Marian, hearing tales of the mysterious outlaw in Sherwood, seeks him out herself. She knows that her small acts of charity aren't enough to stop the sheriff's tyranny. She needs a partner, a force that can challenge him directly. So she ventures into the forest, a dangerous gamble, hoping to find the legendary Robin Hood. Their first meeting isn't one of romance, but of strategy, two brilliant minds recognizing a shared purpose and a powerful potential alliance. Either way, their connection is electric. The romantic subplot begins to blossom, but it's not your typical fairy tale. Their love story is forged in the fires of rebellion. Every stolen moment they share is fraught with danger. A secret meeting in a moonlit glade, a whispered conversation in a crowded market. Their relationship is a high-stakes secret that could get them both killed. This isn't just about love, it's about trust. Can Robin, a man who trusts no one from the world of nobility, open his heart to Marian? And can Marian risk her life, her reputation, and everything she has for a notorious outlaw? Their bond deepens with every shared secret. Robin shares his plans, his fears, and the heavy burden of leadership. And Marian, in turn, becomes his most valuable asset. She is his eyes and ears inside Nottingham Castle. Think of her as the ultimate spy. She overhears conversations between the sheriff and his knights. She sees the maps of patrol routes, and she learns about the schedules of tax collections. This inside intelligence is a complete game changer. Before Marian, Robin's men were reacting to the sheriff's moves. They were brilliant at ambushes and escapes, but they were always on the defensive. Now, with Marian's information, they can go on the offensive. They know exactly when and where a large shipment of tax money will be transported. They know which routes are lightly guarded. They can strike with surgical precision, minimizing risk to their own men and maximizing the damage to the sheriff's operations. Marian's information allows them to intercept tax collectors, not just with brute force, but with cunning and foresight. They're no longer just robbing the rich, they're systematically dismantling the sheriff's financial infrastructure. Every bag of gold they recover and redistribute is a direct blow to his power and a symbol of hope for the oppressed people of Nottinghamshire. Marian isn't just helping Robin, she's empowering the entire rebellion from within. This brings us to the chapter's thrilling climax. Through her network of loyal servants and her own keen observations, Marian uncovers something huge. This isn't just another tax collection or a routine patrol. She learns that the sheriff is planning to host Prince John himself at the castle. And to fund this lavish visit and impress the prince, the sheriff has consolidated a massive treasure, not just gold, but jewels, land deeds, and all the wealth he has extorted from the entire region into a single supposedly impenetrable vault within the castle. This is the opportunity Robin has been waiting for. It's the kind of score that could cripple the sheriff for good, both financially and politically. Humiliating the sheriff in front of Prince John would be a devastating blow to his authority, but the risk is immense. The castle will be on high alert, swarming with the prince's own guards in addition to the sheriff's men. A direct assault would be suicide. Marian delivers this critical intelligence to Robin in a tense, secret meeting. She doesn't just bring him the problem, she brings him a potential solution. She's managed to acquire a partial blueprint of the castle's lower levels, a servant's schedule, or a key piece of information about a forgotten tunnel. She provides the crucial detail, the one small crack in the castle's defenses that they can exploit. And that's where Chapter 5 leaves us, on the edge of our seats. Robin Hood now holds the key to his greatest challenge yet. He has the intelligence, he has the target, and he has the motivation. He now has to devise a plan, a masterful heist to infiltrate the most secure location in Nottingham and strike a blow right at the heart of his enemy's power. The stakes have never been higher, and the fate of the rebellion hangs in the balance. What will Robin do next? We'll have to wait for the next chapter to find out. Thanks so much for watching and diving into this analysis with me. If you enjoyed this breakdown of Maid Marian's incredible role, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss our exploration of the next chapter. Let me know in the comments what you think of this version of Maid Marian. Alright, welcome back everyone. Last time, we left Robin and his merry men thriving in the heart of Sherwood Forest, a beacon of hope for the oppressed. But as winter's chill began to bite, the whispers from the villages grew more desperate. The Sheriff of Nottingham, greedier than ever, had raised taxes to a crippling new high, leaving families to starve while his own coffers overflowed. For Robin Hood, this was a line that could not be crossed. The time for small skirmishes was over. It was time for a plan so audacious, so bold, it would be sung about for generations. It was time for the great Nottingham heist. The planning took place around a crackling fire deep within the greenwood. Little John, his brow furrowed in concentration, laid out a crudely drawn map of Nottingham on a piece of worn leather. Will Scarlet, ever the pragmatist, pointed out the guard patrols, their routes, their numbers. Friar Tuck, despite his holy vows, had a surprisingly keen mind for logistics, calculating how they could move a large haul without being detected. And at the center of it all was Robin, his eyes gleaming with a determined fire. The target wasn't just any treasure. It was the sheriff's personal tax collection, locked away in the most secure vault in Nottingham Castle itself. Getting in was one thing, but getting out with the gold, that was the real challenge. The plan was a masterclass in deception, a beautiful, intricate dance of misdirection and timing. It would require every single member of the merry men to play their part flawlessly. Much the miller, with his dusty clothes and easy smile, would pose as a farmer delivering flour to the castle kitchens, his cart cleverly hiding climbing ropes and tools beneath a false bottom. Little John, a giant of a man, would create a diversion at the main gate, picking a loud, boisterous argument with the guards over a non-existent debt, drawing as much attention as possible. Meanwhile, Will Scarlet and a small, agile team would use the chaos to scale the lesser-guarded eastern wall under the cloak of twilight. Their target, the Treasury Tower, but the most crucial role, the linchpin of the entire operation, fell to Robin himself. He would not be sneaking in the shadows. No, his plan was far more daring. Disguised as a wealthy, slightly eccentric nobleman from the north, draped in fine silks and a plumed hat, he would walk right through the front gate, his cover story. He was there to make a generous donation to the Sheriff's Civic Improvement Fund, a well-known euphemism for the Sheriff's personal slush fund. This disguise would get him inside the castle's main keep, giving him access to areas no commoner could ever hope to reach, and allowing him to act as the inside man, coordinating the movements of his team from within the lion's den. As dusk settled over Nottingham, the plan sprang into action. Much the miller's cart rumbled over the cobblestones, the guards waving him through with barely a glance. A few minutes later, a thunderous roar echoed from the main gate. Little John, in a masterful performance of drunken rage, had two guards completely occupied, their faces red with fury as a crowd began to gather. It was the perfect diversion. On the far side of the castle, dark figures slipped over the stone walls like ghosts, melting into the shadows of the courtyard. The first phase was a success. Inside the keep, Robin, playing his part as the foppish lord, was charming the castle steward with tales of his vast, fictitious estates. He casually mentioned a rare vintage of wine he had brought as a gift for the sheriff, a vintage he just happened to have left with his servant near the Treasury Tower. With a feigned sigh of forgetfulness, he asked the steward for the key to the corridor, promising a bottle for the steward's own table. The steward, blinded by the thought of a rare drink and the nobleman's apparent wealth, eagerly handed over the heavy iron key. The path was clear. Robin met Will Scarlet's team in the dimly lit corridor outside the treasury. The door was immense, made of solid oak and reinforced with iron bands. It had 3 complex locks, each one a testament to the sheriff's paranoia. This was Alan Adale's moment to shine. Not just a minstrel, Alan's delicate fingers possessed a skill with lockpicks that was nothing short of magical. As Robin and Will stood guard, Alan went to work. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. The first lock clicked open, then the second. The third, however, was a new design, fiendishly complex, minutes stretched into an eternity. From outside, they could hear the faint shouts of the guards, Little John's diversion still holding strong. Finally, with a soft snick that sounded as loud as a thunderclap in the silence, the third lock gave way. The door swung open, revealing stacks upon stacks of gold coins shimmering in the lantern light. The sight was breathtaking, but there was no time to stare. The merry men worked with silent, practiced efficiency, stuffing canvas bags with the sheriff's ill-gotten treasure. The weight was immense. They couldn't possibly carry it all out the way they came in. This was the final, and most brilliant, part of Robin's plan. He led them not back to the walls, but down, into the castle's lower levels, towards the kitchens. There, they found Much the miller waiting. They quickly loaded the sacks of gold into his now empty flour cart, concealing them under a fresh layer of empty flour sacks, the perfect getaway vehicle. As Much calmly steered the cart back towards the gates, Robin, his nobleman disguise still intact, made his way to the main hall to bid a very public farewell. He loudly thanked the steward for his hospitality and lamented that he couldn't wait for the sheriff's return, leaving behind the promised bottle of wine. He strode out of the main gate with a confident wave, just as Little John was being escorted away by the exasperated guards, winking at Robin as he passed. The heist was complete. They had walked into the most secure fortress in the land, taken the sheriff for everything he had, and walked right out the front door. News of the heist spread like wildfire. The Sheriff of Nottingham returned to an empty treasury and flew into a rage that shook the very foundations of the castle. He screamed for Robin Hood's head, but it was too late. By the time the alarm was properly raised, the merry men were already deep in Sherwood, their prize secure. But the gold did not stay with them. Over the next few days, mysterious packages began to appear on the doorsteps of the poorest villages around Nottingham. Sacks of coins, enough to buy food, to pay off debts, to survive the harsh winter. There were no notes, no messengers, but everyone knew. They knew it was the work of the man in Lincoln Green. That night, the forests and villages were alive with celebration. Families who had faced starvation now had full bellies and warm fires. Songs were sung, not just in the hidden camps of Sherwood, but in the taverns and homes of Nottingham's common folk. They sang of the audacious plan of the bumbling sheriff and of the hero who had risked everything for them. Robin Hood was no longer just an outlaw. He was a symbol of justice, a legend in his own time. The great Nottingham heist had cemented his place in the hearts of the people forever. Thank you so much for joining me on this chapter of the adventure. It's incredible to see how cunning and courage can triumph over greed. What do you think was the most clever part of the heist? Let me know down in the comments. For weeks, the Sheriff of Nottingham had been a phantom in his own county, always one step behind the elusive outlaw, Robin Hood. The people laughed, the nobles grumbled, and the sheriff's rage grew into a cold, calculated obsession. He knew a direct assault on Sherwood Forest was suicide. Robin's men were masters of that domain, turning every tree and shadow into a weapon. No, this required a different kind of trap, one that preyed not on Robin's weakness, but on his greatest strength, his compassion. The sheriff's spies, a network of whispers and shadows, brought him news. A small village on the outskirts of Sherwood, loyal to Robin, was suffering. A blight had ruined their crops, and a harsh tax collector was due, a man known for his cruelty. Acting under the sheriff's direct orders, the sheriff knew Robin couldn't resist. It was the perfect bait. He didn't just want to capture Robin. He wanted to break his spirit, to show the people that their hero was just a man. On the appointed day, the tax collector arrived with a small contingent of guards, swaggering and cruel. As expected, a single horn blast echoed from the trees. It was Robin Hood, flanked by Little John and Will Scarlet. The fight was short, a whirlwind of staff and arrow that sent the guards scattering. But as Robin confronted the cowering collector, a second horn blast sounded, sharp and piercing, from all around them. It was the sheriff's signal. From the surrounding woods, soldiers poured out not by the dozen, but by the hundred. Heavy crossbows were leveled, their bolts gleaming in the dappled sunlight. Robin and his men were surrounded, a tiny island in a sea of steel. The sheriff rode forward on his black warhorse, a triumphant sneer on his face. "It's over, Outlaw," he declared, his voice ringing with victory. "Your compassion was always your fatal flaw." Robin looked at the terrified villagers, then at his outnumbered friends. For the first time, a look of grim acceptance crossed his face. He lowered his bow. The news of Robin Hood's capture spread like wildfire. It wasn't whispered in taverns, it was a roar of disbelief and anger that echoed from the villages to the city streets. The man who had given them food, hope, and a voice was now in the sheriff's dungeons. Public outcry was immediate and overwhelming. Market squares became forums for protest, with blacksmiths and bakers speaking with the fire of seasoned orators. Songs of Robin's deeds, once sung with cheer, now carried a mournful, defiant tune. The spirit of rebellion, once a flickering flame, was threatening to become an inferno. While the common folk raged, Maid Marian moved with a desperate urgency through the halls of power. She had always been Robin's secret ally, his connection to the world of nobility. Now, she was his only hope. She rode from castle to castle, seeking audiences with the very nobles who had privately benefited from the sheriff's diminished authority. She reminded them of their oaths, of justice, of the growing unrest among the populace that could just as easily turn on them. "He fought for your people when you would not," she argued, her voice clear and steady in the face of their skepticism and fear. "His capture is a message from the sheriff. It says that no one is safe, that Prince John's power is absolute. Today it is Robin Hood, tomorrow it will be your lands, your titles, your families." Some nobles listened, their faces etched with concern. They saw the truth in her words. Others, however, saw only risk. They were cowards, content to let one man hang if it meant preserving their own comfort. Marian's efforts created a fracture among the nobility, a tense division between those willing to stand for what was right and those who would hide behind their castle walls. The sheriff, insulated from the public's fury by stone and steel, moved quickly to solidify his victory. He orchestrated a swift and brutal trial. It was a farce, a piece of theater designed for an audience of one, Prince John. The judge was a loyal crony of the sheriff, the witnesses were bribed or threatened, and the evidence was a collection of fabricated tales and half-truths. Robin stood in chains, refusing to speak in his own defense. He knew it was pointless. He wouldn't grant the sheriff the satisfaction of a plea. He watched the proceedings with a detached calm, his gaze occasionally finding Marian in the gallery, a silent exchange passing between them. The verdict was a foregone conclusion. Guilty. The sentence, delivered with theatrical gravity by the judge, was death. Robin Hood was to be hanged at dawn in the main square of Nottingham. The sentence was meant to crush the people's spirit, to be the final act in the sheriff's triumph. But as the words echoed through the courtroom, they did not inspire fear. They ignited a spark. The injustice was too blatant, the cruelty too stark. The final days leading up to the execution were the most tense Nottingham had ever known. The city was an armed camp. The sheriff's soldiers patrolled every street, their faces grim, their hands never far from their swords. The air itself felt thick with anticipation, a heavy silence that promised a storm. In Sherwood Forest, Robin's men, now led by a stoic Little John, were not idle. They were shadows on the edge of the city, watching, waiting, their grief forged into a sharp edge of determination. They knew a frontal assault was impossible, but they would not let their leader die without a fight. Inside the castle, Marian worked frantically, using her final connections, calling in every favor, trying to find a weakness in the sheriff's fortress. The nobles she had swayed were now mobilizing their own men, but quietly, cautiously. A single misstep could trigger a full-blown civil war. As the sun set on the eve of the execution, all the pieces were in motion. The gallows stood stark against the twilight sky, a grim skeleton waiting for its victim. The people held their breath, the soldiers sharpened their blades, and in the darkest cell of the dungeon, Robin Hood waited for the dawn, unaware of the forces converging to decide his fate. The stage was set for a final, bloody confrontation. Thank you for watching, and be sure to subscribe to see what happens next in this epic tale. Welcome back to our journey through the legendary tales of Robin Hood. Now, we've reached a chapter that pulses with action, rebellion, and the unbreakable spirit of freedom. This is the chapter of rescue and revolution. The stage is set in Nottingham, a town simmering with discontent under the iron fist of its tyrannical sheriff. But the whispers of defiance have grown into a roar, and the time for action is now. The chapter opens with a scene of breathtaking audacity. The merry men, no longer just a band of outlaws hiding in Sherwood, have united with the oppressed villagers of Nottingham. This isn't just a raid, it's a full-blown uprising. Led by the ever-dependable Little John and the fiery Will Scarlet, they storm the town's gates. The air crackles with tension as blacksmiths, farmers, and merchants, armed with whatever they can find, fight side by side with the skilled archers of Sherwood. Their target is the heart of the sheriff's power, the castle dungeon, where Robin Hood is being held captive, awaiting a grim fate. Inside the cold, damp walls of Nottingham Castle, another hero is making her move. The beautiful and brave Maid Marian, who has been playing a dangerous game of courtly life, seizes her moment. She can no longer stand by while the man she loves and the people she cares for suffer. Whether she cleverly bribes a guard, picks a lock with a hidden pin, or simply outwits her captors, the story always emphasizes her courage and intelligence. In some versions, she reaches Robin's cell, and together, they fight their way out. In others, her actions create the perfect diversion, allowing Robin to use his own legendary cunning to break free. Either way, Marian is no damsel in distress. She is a revolutionary, a key player in the fight for justice. Just as Robin emerges from the shadows of the castle, he is met by the thunderous roar of his loyal followers. The sight of their leader, free and defiant, ignites their spirits like a flame. The scattered skirmishes throughout the town coalesce into a major, decisive battle in the castle courtyard. Arrows fly like angry hornets, swords clash in a symphony of steel, and the battle cries of the rebels echo off the stone walls. This is the moment everything has been building towards. Robin, with his unparalleled skill with a bow, turns the tide. He moves through the chaos with a calm purpose, his arrows finding their marks with deadly precision, taking down the sheriff's most formidable knights and guards. The Sheriff of Nottingham, who has watched his power crumble in a single day, is finally confronted. He is a man cornered, his arrogance replaced by a desperate fury. The final duel between him and Robin Hood is legendary. It's not just a fight between two men, but a clash of ideologies, the greed and tyranny of the sheriff versus the justice and freedom that Robin represents. In some tales, the sheriff is defeated in combat, his reign of terror ending for good. In others, ever the coward, he flees Nottingham with his tail between his legs, vowing revenge, but utterly broken. The victory is total, the people have taken back their town. As the dust settles and the cheers of the victorious villagers echo through Nottingham, a new era begins. The town is free, but the fight for England is not over. The corrupt Prince John still holds power, and the true king, Richard the Lionheart, is away on crusade. The chapter closes not with a final ending, but with a hopeful, expectant pause. Robin Hood, Maid Marian, and the merry men have won a major battle, but the war for the soul of the kingdom continues. They stand together, a beacon of hope, awaiting the return of King Richard, ready to ensure that when he comes home, it is to a land of justice and freedom for all. Their legend is secure, their purpose clear, and their story is far from over. Thank you for joining us for this thrilling chapter. The legend of Robin Hood is a powerful reminder that courage, unity, and a demand for justice can change the world. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next adventure. Welcome back to our journey through the legend of Robin Hood. Now, we arrive at the grand finale, the moment everyone has been waiting for, the return of the king. For years, England has groaned under the iron fist of Prince John and his cruel Sheriff of Nottingham. The poor have been taxed into dust, good men have been outlawed, and justice has become a distant memory. But through it all, a beacon of hope has shone from the green depths of Sherwood Forest. Robin Hood and his merry men have fought back, stealing from the rich to give to the poor, and keeping the dream of a just England alive. Their fight has been long and hard, filled with daring raids, clever disguises, and narrow escapes. They've outsmarted the sheriff time and again, stood up to the greedy Bishop of Hereford, and welcomed all who sought refuge from tyranny. They built a community in the heart of the woods, bound not by law, but by loyalty and a shared dream of a better world. But now, a wind of change is blowing across the land. Whispers turn into rumors, and rumors into joyful shouts. A ship has been sighted off the coast, bearing a royal standard not seen in years. King Richard the Lionheart, the true King of England, is coming home from the long and arduous crusades. Imagine the scene. The king, disguised as a simple traveler or a humble abbot, journeys through his own kingdom. He hears tales from peasants and nobles alike, stories of crippling taxes, of injustice, and of a mysterious outlaw in Sherwood Forest who defends the common folk. He sees the state of his country with his own eyes, and his heart grows heavy with a resolve to set things right. The news reaches Sherwood Forest, and a wave of anticipation and uncertainty sweeps through the outlaw camp. Is it true? Is their long wait finally over? Robin Hood, ever the strategist, decides they must see for themselves. In one of the most famous tellings of the tale, King Richard, still in disguise, decides to seek out these legendary outlaws himself. He ventures into Sherwood, where he is, of course, stopped by Robin's men. Following their custom, he's invited, or rather, compelled to dine with their leader. A great feast is prepared. There's venison, ale, and lively music. Richard, a warrior king with a love for adventure, is thoroughly impressed by their skill, their camaraderie, and their unwavering loyalty to him, their absent king. During the feast, a challenge is issued, an archery contest, or perhaps a bout of quarterstaff fighting. Richard, a formidable warrior in his own right, accepts. He trades blows with Little John, or perhaps even Robin Hood himself. He holds his own, earning the respect of the outlaws. Finally, the moment of revelation arrives. The king reveals his true identity. He pulls back his hood, or produces the royal seal. The merry men are stunned into silence, then drop to their knees in awe and relief. Their king, the one they fought for in spirit all this time, is standing right there among them. But what will he do? They are, after all, outlaws who have broken the king's laws. Robin Hood steps forward, head bowed, ready to accept his fate, but Richard the Lionheart is a just king. He has seen the corruption of his brother's rule and heard the stories of Robin's deeds. He sees not criminals, but loyal Englishmen who did what they had to do in the face of tyranny. With a voice that rings with authority and gratitude, King Richard grants a full and free pardon to Robin Hood and every single one of his merry men. He doesn't just forgive them. He praises their courage and their loyalty. He declares them free men, their names cleared, their past deeds redefined not as crimes, but as acts of justice in a lawless time. The outlaws erupt in cheers. The long years of hiding, of being hunted, are over. They can finally leave the shadows of the forest and walk as free men in the sunlight. But the king's work is not done. Justice must be fully restored. King Richard summons the Sheriff of Nottingham to account for his crimes. Can you picture the sheriff's face, the arrogance and cruelty draining away, replaced by pure terror as he stands before the true king? There is no escape, no one to protect him now. His lands are seized, his title stripped, and he is banished from the kingdom, or in some versions, meets a more permanent and fitting end for his treachery. The corrupt officials who worked with him are rounded up and brought to justice. With his enemies punished and his loyal subjects rewarded, King Richard reinstates fair rule across England. The crushing taxes are repealed, the lands stolen from honest folk are returned. A new era of peace and prosperity begins to dawn. And what of our heroes? The merry men, now pardoned, begin to disperse. Some return to the farms and villages they were forced to leave behind. Will Scarlet, Much the miller's son, and Alan a Dale go back to their families and their old lives, their stories becoming local legends. Little John remains by Robin's side, their bond as strong as ever. As for Robin Hood, his story takes a new turn. King Richard, recognizing his leadership and skill, restores his title as the Earl of Huntingdon. Robin of the Hood becomes Robert of Locksley once more, a respected nobleman. He marries his true love, the beautiful and steadfast Maid Marian, in a grand celebration attended by the king himself. The greenwood echoes with one last, great celebration before the band of outlaws disbands, their purpose fulfilled. They leave Sherwood not with sadness, but with the satisfaction of a job well done. They fought for justice, and justice has returned. And so, the adventure concludes, the king is on his throne, the villains are vanquished, and our heroes receive their just rewards. Peace is restored to the land, but the story doesn't end there. The deeds of Robin Hood and his merry men are told and retold, sung in ballads and shared around hearth fires. The man becomes a myth, and the myth becomes a legend, an enduring symbol of hope, of fighting for the common good, and of the timeless belief that even in the darkest of times, one person can make a difference. The legend of Robin Hood is born, never to be forgotten. Thank you so much for joining me on this epic adventure through the life of one of history's greatest legends. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into history and myth. See you next time. For centuries, the name Robin Hood has echoed through the forests of our imagination. A phantom in green, an arrow of justice, a hero for the downtrodden. But as we stand here in the aftermath of victory, with the shadow of Prince John lifted from England, it's time to peel back the layers of legend and look at the man, the myth, and the profound legacy he leaves behind. Was he a real person, a dispossessed nobleman, a common yeoman, or simply a collection of ballads sung around crackling fires? The truth, as it often does, likely lies somewhere in between. History is a tapestry woven with threads of fact and fiction, and the story of Robin Hood is its most vibrant masterpiece. But does it matter if one single man named Robin of Locksley drew a bow in Sherwood? Perhaps not. The power of Robin Hood isn't in his historical accuracy. It's in the enduring idea he represents, the idea that when tyranny reigns, ordinary people can become extraordinary. Look around Sherwood now. The fear that once hung heavy in the air has dissipated, replaced by the sounds of laughter and rebuilding. The merry men, once outlaws hunted for their defiance, are now celebrated as heroes. Will Scarlet, his temper now softened by peace, helps rebuild a farmer's barn. Little John, his immense strength once used to fight guards, now lifts fallen trees to clear new paths. And Friar Tuck, his belly still round, shares food not just with his band, but with every hungry family that was once bled dry by the sheriff's taxes. This is the tangible legacy of their fight. It's not just about redistributing gold, it's about restoring dignity. It's about giving people back their hope, their homes, and their future. The gold they stole was never truly the sheriff's to begin with. It was the sweat and toil of the people, and Robin simply returned it to its rightful owners. He didn't just rob from the rich, he reinvested in the community. He was a radical economist, a social revolutionary, armed with a longbow and an unshakable sense of fairness. The whispers from Nottingham are that King Richard, the Lion Heart, will soon return from his crusades. What will he make of this notorious outlaw who ruled the forest in his absence? Will he see a criminal, or will he see a man who upheld the true spirit of English justice when the crown's own representatives had forsaken it? The legend tells us Richard, in disguise, will come to Sherwood himself to test the man and his famous band. He'll find not a den of thieves, but a functioning, just society in miniature, a testament to what England could be. And what of Robin and Marian, Theirs is a love story for the ages, forged in rebellion and strengthened by shared ideals. Marian was never just a damsel in distress. She was a spy, a strategist, a fighter in her own right. She was the heart of the rebellion just as Robin was its arm. Now, with the fighting done, what does their future hold? Some tales say they retreat into quiet domestic life, raising a family under the greenwood tree. Others say they can never truly lay down their bows, that their fight for justice becomes a lifelong calling. I like to think it's a bit of both. They find their peace, their personal happiness, but they never lose the fire that ignited their rebellion. They teach their children not just how to fletch an arrow, but why it's sometimes necessary to aim it at the castles of the powerful. They instill the values of courage, compassion, and defiance. They ensure that the spirit of Sherwood is passed down, not as a fairy tale, but as a lesson. A lesson that power must always be held accountable, and that the welfare of the people is the highest law. The world will change, kings will come and go. Forests will shrink, and cities will grow, but the need for heroes like Robin Hood will never fade. The story adapts, evolves with the times. In one era, he's fighting feudal lords. In another, he's a symbol against corporate greed or political corruption. His attire may change, his weapons may modernize, but his core purpose remains constant. He is the voice for the voiceless, the protector of the vulnerable. Why has this story survived for over 700 years? Because deep down, we all feel that sense of injustice. We all see a world where the scales are often tipped in favor of the wealthy and the powerful. We all yearn for someone to stand up and say, "No more." Robin Hood gives us that catharsis. He is the embodiment of our own desire for a fairer world. He is the ultimate symbol of hope. The legend isn't just about a man in green tights, it's a promise. A promise that when greed and oppression become unbearable, a new resistance will rise. It might not be in a forest, and it might not use a bow and arrow. It might be in a courtroom, in a protest, on the internet, or in a simple act of kindness to a neighbor in need. The spirit of the outlaw is the spirit of active compassion, of refusing to be a bystander to suffering. So as we leave Sherwood to the mists of time and legend, remember this: the story of Robin Hood doesn't truly end. It's a cycle. It's a question posed to every generation. When you see injustice, will you look away, or will you find your own Sherwood, your own band of merry men, and your own way to fight back? The legend lives on not in ancient scrolls or dusty books, but in the hearts of those who refuse to let the powerful write the final chapter. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the life and legacy of one of history's greatest legends. If you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next exploration into the myths that shaped our world. Let us know in the comments which legendary figure you'd like to see us cover next. Until then, remember the closing words of the oldest ballads, a warning and a promise that still rings true today. Wherever injustice rises, the outlaw returns.
As we close this chapter of the Chrono Archives, remember, the past is never truly gone. It waits patiently in the shadows of forgotten ruins, in the echoes of ancient voices, and in the timeless lessons that still guide us today. It waits to be remembered by curious minds like yours. Thank you for joining us on this extraordinary journey through the annals of time. If today's exploration of lost civilizations, mythical legends, or historical enigmas ignited your passion for the past, hit that like button. Drop a comment with your favorite moment or what you'd love to see next, and most importantly, subscribe to the Chrono Archives and continue the journey through time. Turn on notifications so you never miss an episode where we unearth buried secrets, decode ancient mysteries, and bring history's greatest stories back to life. Together, we'll keep the flame of the past burning bright. Until next time, fellow time travelers, keep questioning, keep discovering, and keep remembering. The Chrono Archives, where the past lives forever.